then if you think in terms of analytic prime numbers, right? If you think in terms of analytic prime numbers, right? Analytic prime theory or analytic number theory, then you have to do the analysis, right? You have to do the analysis for the remaining bit, right? You have to do the analysis for the remaining bit, right? You have to do the analysis for the remaining bit. And what's the remaining bit? Well, the remaining bit is a complex plane, right? The remaining bit is complex analysis, accounting for imaginary numbers and everything in there. And because mathematics is pure and it has equifinality, then that means if I solve the answer at the most elegant and simplest way, which is using elementary geometry, elementary algebra, that means that I found the equifinality, meaning in mathematics, once you know the answer and you know the mechanism, then you can apply the same rules and the same mechanisms to the complex plane itself to test it, to make sure that it also holds in the complex plane. And guess what? It does. And you can test it using any of the different theorems out there within the complex plane itself, within the complex analysis itself, the entire branch of mathematics, analytic number theory, all of it, since before Riemann. You account at all levels, under all circumstances, and it always holds because you already found the answer using real numbers. So because you do it using real numbers, then obviously you're going to find it using imaginary numbers and using complex numbers and complex analysis, etc. and so on. Because it is real. It's geometric. It exists. So then what does that mean? We build the world with a margin of error, right? Approximating. But the calculation had enough of a margin of error. It was close enough to the 0.5 critical line that we've been able to build the world that we have been able to build using mathematics that were incomplete, right? Incomplete mathematics with margin of error. But now, essentially, I have proven that there is no need for a margin of error. In fact, we don't need to approximate. We can know exactly what anything is, mathematically speaking, and calculate it to the exact precision of its own zeta zeros, its own critical lines, its own topology, its own geometry at any dimension. One dimension meaning one line, two dimensions meaning two lines, the Cartesian plane, the complex plane, and three-dimensional, which is objects and solids, such as the actual sphere, which is just the bigger representation of the Riemann sphere, which is just a one-dimensional sphere in the complex plane that accounts S as, X. So linearity, right? So when you do that, and then you can have the volume of everything, V1 equals 2 in terms of its volume, and then that applies to real volume of the solids of real life, using the sphere to account for it, then you can derive everything. Meaning any mathematical problem that you have can be solved instantly, because then you can apply the same principle, the same equations that I derive, which are laws of mathematics, which are all in the paper. It can be applied to any field. Right? It can be applied to any applied mathematics, which means that any branch of science, anything that is real, that we do to create and build and manufacture, accounts for it immediately, instantly. It doesn't matter what it is: biology, chemistry, physics, mathematics, engineering, manufacturing, computing, anything, meaning we can refactor everything. The blueprints, the design, the planning, the manufacturing, the manufacturing workshops, the floors, the industrial parks, everything that builds something, everything that manufactures, robotics, AI, building, construction, everything, fabrication, manufacturing, everything that is built, that is designed by engineers and designers and architects and people who apply geometry and mathematics in terms of algebra and calculus to do anything that is relevant, when you apply the real critical line, which is the one that I have found, then you remove the margin of error from everything. Meaning that you start to manufacture things without any faults, without any margin of error, because you know precisely what the critical line of the zeta zero poles are for each of those spaces and each of those applied mathematics and each of those things. So for example, you can know the specific distribution of all the human body cells if you are doing biology, for example, and its space and dimension, and you can know and monitor exactly how spherical a human cell is, and you can know everything about the human DNA if you wanted to, all the content of it, right? That's an example of how this applies to biology, right? An example of how this applies to chemistry is now that we can know the exact composition of all atoms, of all elements, all the isotropic nature and polarity and charge of all elements in the periodic table, meaning that we can build incredible materials now because we know the density, the volume, and the weight, and all the characteristics and attributes of all the calculations required to know everything about an element, which would allow us to not only know everything about all the elements in the periodic table, but to know exactly all the other elements that we're missing in infinity. Because it's like, you think of prime numbers are like the atoms of mathematics. So if you understand what the atom of mathematics is, then you can understand the atom of everything, meaning the atoms of existence. And because you understand that, then you can know exactly all the elements that exist that we don't know yet, that we haven't found or discovered. But because they're like prime numbers, we can calculate the magnitude of it, and we would know based on the density of the space structure field itself of existence. So all the minerals that we haven't discovered, all the materials that we haven't been able to manufacture, alloys or anything, all the different elements that we haven't encountered yet and we don't understand, then we will be able to account for immediately. That's just what chemistry is. You see, biology and chemistry. The cell, which is the unit of irreducibility in biology, and the atom, which is the unit of irreducibility in chemistry, gives us the elements. Then we can know everything for everything, which is the equivalent of the prime number in mathematics. Because remember, this is a prime number theorem that applies to everything. Then if you do the same for physics, then you can understand mass. You can understand matter. You can understand motion in a way in which not approximation like Einsteinian and Newtonian physics, which is just an approximation. No, you can know precisely what the molecules, what the particles, what the waves are, and they're all spherical in nature, and you can know all its oscillations, and you can understand what it means at all levels, smaller than, because it's a scale, right? Because it's roots. And when you calculate the geometry, it applies at all scales of infinity. Infinitely large, infinitely small. You can go beyond the Planck length. That was known as a Planck particle. Way smaller than Higgs bosons and quarks and all this stuff. You go into infinity, infinitely small at the quantum level. And then you can go infinitely large at the astronomical level, and you unify physics, which is what I've done mathematically speaking, because if you understand physics requires mathematics. And the most important mathematics are the mathematics that I solve, because it applies to all fields, because I essentially solve Riemann Hypothesis. So that's physics. So you can account for everything. Energy, motion, light, speed, everything. Gravity. Right? Everything. And then we think about the application in terms of manufacturing for propulsion and design and materials. So essentially we can design and manufacture indestructible materials, for example, that can tolerate everything, and all sorts, right? That's just an example. We can travel faster than the speed of light now with actual propulsion, which is based on the energy of the sphere. So these are all the different things that you got to understand what this actually means as a blueprint, mathematically speaking. Then if you think those are the the three big ones, right? Chemistry, mathematics, and physics, right? And biology. So, and then if you understand computing, which is a big one, then you know everything. So that means that our computers, the hardware itself, the kernel itself, and the software running on that kernel, the OS, and all the applications on the layer of the OS, they all can be recalibrated to account for primes now in a full magnitude, which means a whole refactoring of the way we conceive computing in the first place. Yes, the computer would still use the foundation of the operators ones and zero, the binary system, binary numbers, to communicate at the most foundational level, because it's what creates the prime numbers in the first place, because I have proven it. But now you can have extremely sophisticated communication at the post-quantum, at all levels. And not only communication, data transfer, compression, anything that you can, processing, meaning that you can process. So when you manufacture chips, right, which are fundamental for the modern world, you're manufacturing chips accounting for no margin of error, meaning you're not going to be wasting calculations, you're not going to be wasting processing GPUs and CPUs and CIs and all that, OIs and IOs and all that stuff, input, output, and all that, in garbage noise that's biased, that you're using the complex plane to find nothing, right? You use real mathematics, the real plane, and account for the noise, which is the imaginary numbers and the bias immediately, and you remove it. So your calculations are bare metal, as is known, meaning like if the hardware gives you this capacity, you're going to be doing real productive work at that capacity. You're not just using that to crank a number and to produce a number so you can get to the calculation that you're seeking. You get the immediate calculation that you want in the first place at full speed, bare metal. And that's what we have right now. So imagine the efficiencies, all the heat, all the friction that goes away in computing, all the waste, all the calculation waste goes away, because all the effort goes directly to actually seeking the answers, which is why I also solve P equals MP, because all the answers are contained within the problem itself. So because it's a volume of it. So if you understand primes, you get the answer immediately. And this applies to all fields, all fields. So engineering, manufacturing, materials, construction. Just think of anything that has value in the real world, how we measure things in reality. Think of anything. And this is now zero error, no margin of error, no approximation. The answer is precise. So you will be able to design and create to perfection, to the limit of infinity itself when it accounts to that specific field that you're pursuing, no matter what it is. So you're going to know the truth. And because you know the truth, then you can calculate based on the truth, right? And this is the whole point. This is why the Riemann hypothesis is the most important point, because it solves everything. It solves everything, right? It's the unification of everything. It's a grand theory of everything. You know, it's known as the theory of everything and all that, unifying physics, or essentially this is unifying everything. So it's essentially removing all the noise and all the bias and all the errors and all the holes and all the patches and all the renormalizations and all the normalizations of all the mathematics in human history in all fields of applied science and applied mathematics and everything. You know, everything that is applicable, everything that is applied, that needs mathematics, which is pretty much everything that we do in the modern world. If you understand this objectively, then all the errors, all the margins, all the patches, all the approximations, all the estimations, all the guesses, all the bias, all the noise disappears immediately. It goes away. You know everything to the precise count of everything. So imagine the world that we have been built, that we've built in the last 200 years, just having an approximation of reality. And look at what we've done. Now think of what we're going to do now that we know reality for what reality is at all scales, without any margin of error. As you understand mathematics and magnitude and law of large numbers and stuff, if you have a deviation, a deviation from the mean, which is an error, right? If you quantify and do the qualitative analysis and the quantitative analysis of that measurement, you know that when you start to apply growth to that, geometric growth or linear growth, it doesn't really matter. Logarithmic growth, it doesn't really matter. Anything that expands to infinity, and you have a deviation, standard deviation, and the error is of a given magnitude, even if it's 0.001% of something, when you add that to infinity, it creates a big error. It goes into a large number, and it becomes a massive deviation from the mean, from the actual truth, which is a critical line, 0.5. The actual count, right? In this case, prime numbers, or the atom, or the molecule, or the cell, or the material, or the element, or the signal from the computer board, from the hardware, the message, the compiling, whatever. It doesn't matter. So that means that when you remove that, and there's no margin of error, there's statistical analysis gives you 0 linear regression, meaning there's no error, right? There's no bias, there's no noise. It is the answer. This is it. You don't need any of these primitive analysis to try to figure out locations and coordinates and vectors and things using linear regression and all that. No, because you know exactly where it will be, to the exact precision, right? So think about what that means for everything. Space, vacuum, energy, infinity itself, reality for what it is, biology, objective reality, existence, biology, who we are as a species, who we are, capable of understanding these to the preciseness of creation itself, Genesis itself, what creates the numbers and the atoms of existence itself. So the implications are infinite, right? Obviously. So then you understand this for what it is. All right? So it's very powerful. And I happen to be the human that have done this, right? So, but it's there. You can check my work. It's been peer reviewed already. So it's there. You know, it's there. It's proper mathematics. You can give it to any AI. They would do all sorts of analysis on it, and the answer would always be the same, because it's the truth. So that's just the way it works. And then we need to start doing the mahi now. We need to do the work now, which is putting it into practice and doing the right things, right? Because we know the truth. As I said in my previous video, we have entered the era of applied truth, because we're not seeking the answer. We're not seeking the truth anymore. We know the truth. So we just are seeking the answers contained within the truth, which are infinite in nature, and they will be precise and exact, because we know what the blueprint of infinity itself is. So you got to understand what I mean to understand the implications. Because pure mathematics is pure for a reason, because it doesn't tell lies. It's the truth. It either is or isn't. And the fact that there is no deviation and it's perfect precision, 0.5, it means that it is, because it applies at all levels: arithmetic, algebra, calculus, real analysis, integrals, convergence, sets, codomains, domains, everything that can be analyzed using real numbers and real analysis and all that, and accounts for the analytic number theory as well, which is the complex plane and the complex numbers, imaginary numbers, everything that exists. So this is the code, is the answer. We found it, and that's what it is, and it's there for humanity already. So this is one of my contributions to humanity, to all nations, right? So the conclusion of my solution is my contribution, meaning that it holds, right? It's mathematics. Mathematics don't lie. That's why it's pure, because it's honest, it's sincere, it tells the truth. It can't lie, because the numbers don't lie. If you do the math, then it doesn't only hold, but it checks out at all levels of physics, right? So that's what it is. So it's very powerful. It's very good stuff, and just that's why now, if you want to understand, the implications, this is why the planet is a sphere, because everything is spherical in nature. This is why the human cells, which is us, are spherical. This is why the atoms are spherical. This is why energy is spherical. This is why elements are spherical. This is why everything is spherical, because the sphere is the scale of creation. Is how creation itself replicates itself to infinity, energetically speaking. And then it forms into solids like us, right? Objects, biologically speaking. That's why our eyes are spherical, so we can understand that infinity itself, energy itself, is spherical. Its own electromagnetic field, its own energy is spherical, right? And everything is spherical. The sun itself, which is infinite energy of creation, is a sphere of energy. The singularity itself, when you look at it magnetically as energy, is a sphere of energy. Everything is a sphere. And because I mapped it geometrically, topologically, and numerically, then it is the way it is. Because I mapped it. This is just the way it is. This is why when you look at nature, for example, you have beautiful arrangements like this, like you got fractals like this, based on pi and phi. Because phi is this irrational number, which is like the scaling growth of nature. It's like a fractal growth law, which is part of the work you are in mathematics. So you can calculate this, and this is why you got these beautiful things, right? These geometries in nature. Ours are beautiful symmetries and all that, based on the sphere, because the sphere is the only thing that can create that beauty beyond the sphere itself, because the sphere is the beginning, then it creates everything outside of it. It's contained within it, because it's infinite spheres within spheres, but that biology of that sphere is just beautiful like that. For example, non-biological things, like inorganic things, like say stones, like these minerals, they have all these different formations, but at the molecular level, at the atom level, these are all spheres coming together, making this beautiful object, right? This crystal. And that's how it works, and it applies to everything. But the creation, the fundamental itself, is a sphere. That's why the planet is a sphere, because it's a vessel of life. That's why the creator itself, in terms of energy, in the physical reality where we live, is the sun, because the sun is the energy that creates everything, and it happens to be spherical. Because it's the building pattern of infinity. It's this building sphere, is a organizing agent of creation, the sphere. And energy creates, so it's spherical energy, and because the sphere is infinite in nature, that's why it's a sphere, because it's infinite in nature, because it's boundless, it's eternal, it's endless. It doesn't have an end. The sphere, has an infinite number of points on it, and vectors and nodes, internally, externally, on the surface, within its space structure. So, and when you have energy, then you create, right? And because it's infinite energy, it has to be spherical to be able to have that pulse of infinity and release creation and elements and all that. So you see, that's how it works, and this is the way it is. So I wanted to make this video to explain the previous one that I made, right? So because in the previous one, I just spoke about it. I said, hey, I did this. This is the proof. Check it out. But now I'm giving you a little bit of a detailed video as to why this is important and how is it that this actually works, mathematically speaking, and also the implications, the ramifications, right? The application of these, and why is it that is the truth? Because it is the truth. It's not that we created it, we found it. We discovered something that is infinite and ancient as creation itself, but we just were able to finally map it out mathematically to comprehend everything for what everything truly is, right? And this is the beauty of it. And this is who we are as a species. We're the consciousness and self-awareness of infinity itself. We're the intelligence of creation at the biological scale that can comprehend infinity for what infinity is, which is infinite creation, infinite energy, and is spherical in nature. And we are that awareness. We are that consciousness, that self-awareness. And we express by our biology, which is expressed by our DNA, which happens to be a nucleus that happens to be spherical. So we are the biology of that. So we're the biology of infinite energy. This is the species that we are with the human race. We are an incredible species. So if we understand our nature and we understand who we are, then we start to get closer to the truth. Because by going within, then we go into the source of creation, because we are it at the biological scale, which means that everything is within us as a species. So when you go inside and you understand who you are at the most fundamental level, then you start to realize that, hey, I am infinite because I'm part of this infinity. I'm part of this infinite sphere of creation. And I am just an active conscious state that is self-aware at the biological scale of everything that there is and would always be. And I'm one with it, and it is one with me. So that's why we can connect with everything infinitely. And we are not only connecting, but we are it. We are its pulse. We are its expression. We are it. And it is us. We are the same. We're one. You see, that's why the sphere is one. But within it is everything. And outside of it is it. Because it becomes, then what's outside of it becomes its electromagnetic field, which is the singularity of its own. So then that applies to all levels, you see, to all levels of scales, because that's what the sphere is an infinite space structure that applies to all levels, and it's a membrane of energy that has biological levels and non-biological levels, organic levels and inorganic levels, at all space vacuum structure levels. You see, all dimensions, all vectors. It's just the way it is. And we happen to be at the biological scale, the consciousness and self-awareness of that. So we are it at the biological scale. And this is what the human heartbeat does, is this pulse that generates this magnetic field, this electromagnetic field, this energy field around our body that is spherical in nature so we can exist. The pulse of life, the pulse of creation is the human heartbeat. So because we are one with that pulse of radiance of infinite energy at the singularity of the sun, which itself is a sun of its own, that energy that just creates to infinity. And we are the biological expression of that, right? So we are biological suns, right? Our hearts are that. So this is who we are. And the mathematics is clear. Once you understand the mathematics, then you can apply it to any question that you might have in any field, and then the answer will be precise. And it will tell you, yes, this is the answer. Okay, this is today's video. Remember, I love you all with all my heart and all my might. I'm Jam, Jose Alonso Molina.